What's going on, everybody? This is Bobby G back again with another Saturday Shpiel. To all my fellow Yehudi Meshachi out here, I want to say Chag Sameach Sukkot. It's the Feast of Tabernacles as of last night when the sun went down, and this goes for another week. And it's interesting because this morning I was doing my morning devotionals and wondering what should I speak on for this week. And it's interesting. And the Feast of Tabernacles came up, which is interesting because it reminds us of when we were in the wilderness. And boy, are we in the wilderness this year. Like, we've been in the wilderness since this pandemic has really hit, and a lot's going on. And yet, I was reading, matter of fact, I was reading in the book of Mysteries, which is a devotional by Rabbi Jonathan Cahn. For those of you who don't know who he is, he caused quite a stir when he released his first book called The Harbinger, and he has a book out called The Harbinger 2 now, which I'm currently reading among his many books. But it talks about how even in the blessing of Israel, that it's not just the promised land that is a blessing, but also being in the wilderness that's a blessing. And I thought about that for a second, and I went, I wonder how it could be a blessing. And I looked back, and when we see in the Old Testament, in the Exodus, during the trials, during the plagues even beforehand, and being out there in the wilderness of Sinai, and in the wilderness of Midian before they even get to the Promised Land, and really it shows how Moses and those who really followed God really depended upon God for everything, for food, water, provision, how to live, really, how to live a way of life. I mean, that's what the Torah is for. That's what the mitzvot are for, the 10 Commandments, or the 10 words, as some are referring to them. And it really shows, in the wilderness, which is where they got them, by the way, how they were to live. And you look at Abraham, who fled or left from Ur of the Chaldeans, eventually came to Haran, stayed there for a while, and eventually came into the Promised Land, which he didn't really know where to go. If you look at the prophet Elijah, when he was fleeing from Jezebel after he had taken care of the prophets of Baal, and I say taken care of because if you've read 1 Kings 18 and 19, you know what I mean. But he goes in and you know, he's having a hard time, and he says, God, you know, why don't you just take me, because I'm no better than the rest of my fathers. Eventually he gets waken up not once but twice, and he's told, rise, eat, for the journey's too hard for you. And the food that God provides him with is enough to last him 40 days, which is another interesting number because 40 comes up a lot in those scriptures. But it takes him 40 days all the way, it says, to the mountain of God, to where God speaks to Elijah in a still small voice, where he's away from everything. When you think about it, when Elijah gets all his distractions taken away from him is when he hears God. When the Israelites get away from all the distractions of Egypt and they're in the wilderness, they focus on God. When Jesus, after he was baptized, was led into the wilderness to be tempted by the evil one, to be tempted by the devil, it says he was out there for 40 days, 40 nights. He didn't eat any food, he didn't drink any water, and afterward he was hungry. And he was tempted with all manner of temptation, including the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. What was the lust of the flesh? Food. What was the lust of the eyes? The kingdoms of the earth. What was the pride of life? Being taken to the top of the temple. And yet he was able to resist all three, not apart from the temptation, but in spite of it. And really, the wilderness can fold and mold us to rely on God, or at least it should. Obviously, by the time many see this, they will be aware of the fact that the President and the First Lady have contracted coronavirus. I'm not a fan of the current president. I'll say that out there. I'll put that out there. But I still seek to pray for him and for the First Lady, as well for everyone in the White House who's been infected with the virus. And if you look at throughout the centuries, whether it's through extreme devotion, which is Voice of the Martyrs devotion, which I also do, even in the midst of rulers who some may have been seen as unjust, the believers in these testimonies, and Eusebius says the same thing, the old church father who wrote the first 3 centuries of the church's history, talks about how many like Polycarp and Ignatius and Clement and so many others prayed for their persecutors, prayed for those who may not have liked them, may not have considered them to be friends. Even so, to the point where even the jailer who locked up Paul and Silas eventually asked, "What must I do to be saved?" Now, I will also say this, that the wilderness can show who people really are. Being in the wilderness can be a blessing because it sifts the wheat from the tares. It separates the goats and the sheep. Because when you're in the wilderness, there's really nothing else you have out there. Like, I've been to a few different deserts in the world. I can tell you plainly, when you're out in the desert, or in my case, being Navy, when you're out in the ocean, and I'm talking about in the open ocean, I'm not talking about near any land at all. When you are out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, or the Gulf of Mexico, or the Atlantic Ocean, which I've been in the middle of all three, where there's like no islands, or there's islands from miles away you can barely see on the horizon, you really get a lot of alone time with God. You really get time to really reflect on where you're at and how you view things, especially with the crew that you're riding around with on the high seas. Why do I say that? I say all this to say that during this Feast of Tabernacles, during this week, which I'll be doing a follow-up, hopefully next Saturday for Saturday Shpiel, because Sukkot will still be going on at that point. That will be the last day. During this Feast of Tabernacles, during this week, this particular week, take the time as we're in this wilderness. Look around in all that you see and ask yourself, where am I strong in the Lord? Where has the Lord made me strong? And give thanks for that. But also ask yourself, as I will be doing and have been doing, where do I need to improve? Search the scriptures. Search God in prayer. Ask yourself and ask God, where am I lacking? Where am I lacking in trust? Where am I lacking in provision? Where am I lacking in wisdom? That I may grow, that I may hold on to God more, that I may trust God all the more, so that through not only hopefully the rest of this week, the rest of this Feast of Tabernacles or Sukkot, but through the rest of this year, that I may have the strength, that I may have the peace, that I may have that which will sustain me and that which will carry me and those I love and care for through this challenging time. Take the time, free yourself from distractions, and think about these things. My name is Bobby G. This is a Saturday Shpiel for this week. Hopefully, I'll see y'all next week as we wrap up the Feast of Tabernacles. Peace.